Hi everyone and welcome back to Year 4 Storytime. It's our second day of Roman Diary, The Journey of Ileona, a Young Slave by Richard Platt. Day 16 of Myus. Tomorrow we shall visit the baths. Though we have a bathroom here with a small tub, Cytheris tells me that we are going somewhere altogether more grand. The baths of Nero, who ruled Rome 50 years ago, a cruel man hated by all Romans. Cytheris says his reputation earned him a saying, "What could be worse than Nero, or better than his baths?" Day 17. How can I begin to describe Nero's baths? They're more like a palace. The huge building towers over the neighbourhood. A gurgling aqueduct, a river on legs, brings water from distant hills, and steam pours from the windows. The baths are so cheap they're almost free. Anyone who has a quadrans, Rome's smallest coin, can soak all afternoon. It seemed that the visit to the baths was a chance for my mistress to show off how many slaves she can afford, for she insisted that every one of us come with her. We set off in the afternoon. Two carried her in a litter. One walked ahead, and the rest of us followed. Once we were inside, we had changed into our subligari and mamileres. My mistress set one of us to guard our clothes, and took two more to wash, oil, and massage her. The rest of us could do as we pleased for the afternoon. Cytheris took me from room to room until we came to the hot bath, the steamy coldarium. Here we lounged, pampering each other until we met some friends of Cytheris's. When she introduced me as newly enslaved, they were all very sorry for me. As we talked, each revealed how they had become slaves. Most had been born of slave parents, but one blonde girl from Germany had been taken by Roman soldiers when they crushed a revolt there. It's a picture of the Roman baths. Day 20. A fortnight ago, I wrote a letter to Apollo and gave it to my mistress. She promised that the overseer, who regularly travels between Rome and the farm, would take it to him, but I've had no reply. Day 25. This morning I awoke with a thundercloud around my head. I had dreamed that Apollo and I were back on Mytilene, doing the things we used to do together before we were captured, running on the open hills and swimming in the sea. When I awoke, the walls around me felt like a prison. My master saw my long face, and I told him about my dream. He tried to make me feel better about living here in Rome, finishing with the words, "There's always a chance of manumission." Didn't understand this Latin word, so he explained that a good obedient slaves may be freed through the kindness of their masters, or they may buy their freedom with money that they earn. His words lifted my stifling gloom, and I began to hope that I might not live my whole life as a slave. Day 27th of Myus. I learned today that the older brother of Marcus and Lucullus is a legionnaire who will be returning to Rome soon for the triumph of the Emperor Trajan. This grand parade is to celebrate the victory of the Roman forces at Dacia. That's modern day Romania, I think. And it will be a fantastic spectacle with all of Rome will watch. Day 29. I made the mistake of talking to Cytheris about manumission. Are you mad? She exploded. We earn little bits of pocket money a week for skivvying around this house. You know, there are 16 of us there's 16 asses in a denarius. They paid 500 denarii for you. It would take 3 lifetimes of work for you to buy your freedom. Then she threw a cushion at me and ran from the room in tears. Now I'm as full of sorrow as before, and guilty too for having reminded her of how hopelessly trapped we both are. Day 1 of the month of Eunus. My mistress sent me on an errand this morning. It was the first time I ventured out into Rome streets on my own. My task was to collect some embroidery from a seamstress who lives on the top floor of an apartment block. Even by the standards of Rome, which are pretty low, it was a crumbling wreck. The seamstress was hurrying to pack and practically threw the work at me. "The walls will come down, Greek girl," she warned me. "Show us Trajan's the emperor." I hurried down the stairs. I saw everyone else who dwelled and worked there leaving. One man just jerked his thumb over his shoulder and said, "Hasten!" A huge crack had appeared on the side of the building. I did just that and breathed a sigh of relief when I was out on the street once more. But my ordeal wasn't over. There was no great distance back to my home, but the streets lacked signs and names, and finding your way is more like guesswork than navigation. In my haste, I took a wrong turn, and in vain gazed around me for a shop, a house, a tree, anything that I recognised. As I struggled, I heard a voice from me saying, "You lost?" I spun around to face an elderly, white-haired man dressed in a clean and neatly pressed toga. Such was my panic that I could not remember a word of Latin, and I answered in Greek, "Yes, where am I?" To my amazement, he replied in Greek, "I'm Greek too, though I've lived here most of my life. Where do you live?" I told him my master's house was on the Quirinal Hill, not far from Hill Gate, and close to where a huge fig tree grows. "I know the place," the old man said. He begged me to follow him within a fourth part of an hour. Within a fourth part of an hour, he had led me home. I turned around to find my newfound friend, but he was already 10 paces away. "You are lucky. Gaius Martius is a good man," he shouted over his shoulder. I was too far away to reply, so I just waved. I wonder if I will see him again, to thank him properly for his help. Day 3. I learned that the apartments I visited collapsed just an hour after I was there. Cytheris didn't seem surprised when I told her. 2 or 3 come down each week, she said. Day 5. The task of emptying the chamber pots is shared among all the slaves. Today it's my turn, and I was about to empty them into the drain next to the kitchen when Cytheris hissed, "Stop!" She explained that the urine is used here in Rome for cleaning clothes and is bought and sold and even taxed. That's people's we. I found this hard to believe, but that night a stinking wagon drew up and the driver tipped the foul liquid into a jar. For this, Cyprus was told, we receive a few quadrantes each week. I've decided that I shall save all mine to buy Apollo's freedom. Day 7 of Enunius. We were woken last night by a tremendous tumult. My master's eldest son, Critias, had returned. He had tried to slip in through the back door without attracting attention, but instead awoke the doorman, who took him for an intruder and challenged him. By the time the misunderstanding had been untangled, the whole house was awake and gathered in the peristylum. Cratinus seemed to be very haughty and pleased with himself, and I was soon bored with the spectacle and slipped back to bed. Day 8. Cratinus, it's just like the soldiers who guard the fort on Mytilene. They think armor and scars make it impossible for girls to resist their charms. I had to endure an hour of his stories about how brave he had been in Dacia. It was dull to the extreme, though it did make me laugh once or twice. Day 10. I foolishly smiled at Cratinus this morning when I was in the kitchen preparing food for baby Lydia. Taking this as encouragement, he pinched my bottom. How rude. I spun around and spat my fury at him, ending, "And if you pinch me again, I shall tell your parents." At this, he threw back his head and laughed. "Tell them. Tell anyone you like. Tell all of Rome. For you're just a slave girl, and I can do whatever I like." I think he would have gone further if I had not been holding a kitchen knife, but he just picked up a fig and pushed it whole into his fat mouth and walked into the atrium. Day 11. Cratinus has injured his foot. He was showing off to his brothers in the peristylum, pretending to assault a statue, when his sword glanced off its marble arm and nearly took off one of his toes. Now he worries he will not be able to march in Emperor Trajan's triumph in 6 days' time. I'll be quite glad if he can't. Day 13. At dinner today, I brought in a dish just as the family were teasing Cratinus about his endless war stories. Suddenly, he lost his temper. "Do you want to know what Dacia was really like?" he yelled. Without waiting for a reply, he continued, "Shall I tell you how Decebalus set fire to everything as he retreated, so that we had nothing to eat as we followed him? Or perhaps you'd like to know about the Battle of Tepe?" "Oh, yes, our Emperor's great victory, but it wasn't quite as glorious as many of you have heard. The grass was red with Roman blood, and there were so many injured that the Emperor tore his cloak to strips to make bandages." For a moment, it was so quiet that I could hear the fountain outside the atrium. Then our master said quietly, "Cratinus, we know how much you have suffered, but there are children here. Why don't you go and rest?" Cratinus got up and slowly left the room. After that, I felt a little sorry for Cratinus. All the same, I was relieved to learn from Cytheris that he will not be with us much longer. His legion will leave Rome directly after the triumph. Day 15 of the month of Enunius. Our complete household was in a state of great excitement at the thought of watching today's triumph, all except for Cytherea, who had to stay behind to look after little Lydia. We had been fighting for a week over which one of us would go. In the end, Cestius tossed the dice, and I won, which threw Cytherea into a great sulk. It was still dark when we left the house, but the streets were turned almost as bright as day by the torches of the people who had flocked to see the spectacle. They so crowded the street that my master and mistress were forced to abandon their seat chairs and walk like common people. They shuffled slowly to Octavian's walks, where the senators and other dignitaries were to greet the emperor. I went with Marcus, Lucellus, Cestius, and the other 7 slaves to find a place to stand. We seemed to wait forever before there was anything to look at. While we hopped impatiently from foot to foot, I spotted at some distance away the white-haired Greek who had helped me home. I yelled and waved, but he didn't hear me. Then a terrific roar from the crowd told us that the parade had begun, and a moment later soldiers in brilliant shiny armour filled the road to bursting point. I looked for Cratinus, thinking I would spot him from his limp, but all the troops marched in perfect time. Then I saw the emperor himself, in a magnificent golden chariot drawn by 4 white horses. A slave held a laurel wreath above his head. He wore no helmet, and I realized for the first time he was just a man like any other. When I told Cestius I thought I had expected to see a god, he snorted. All emperors think the gods. When Trajan and more of his troops passed, I picked up my cloak, but Marcus hissed, "Not yet." See you tomorrow. Bye bye.